Okay, we're ready to go. We'll call the meeting to order. It's 30 October, council time. We'll start with a roll call. I'm sorry. Oh. Okay, my
Yes.
apologies. Community Development Fee Schedule Update Proposal. Looking at the wrong agenda.
All right, so first I'd like to introduce Chad Dragon, Finance Manager for Community Development, and he will be walking us through the presentation. And then if you have any questions, or there comes a point where council requested some scenarios last time we had a work session, and so Brent Davis, Land Use Wetland Habitat Manager, might answer some of those questions. Awesome.
Right. Well, good afternoon, Council. My name is Chad Dragon. I'm the Finance Manager, as April said, of the Department of Community Development. And what we have before you today is we're actually returning with a little more information about fee update proposals for the Land Use Review and the Wetland and Habitat Review programs. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Okay, there we go. And so what I'd like to do before I get into some of the feedback we received from previous work session and a meeting with Development Engineering Advisory Board is I'd just like to get into a little bit of the background again to make sure that we are all on the same page and just to refresh our memories a little bit since it has been a little bit of time since our last work session. So I'll start with the background on this. The Land Use Review and the Wetland and Habitat Review programs, they've each received annual general fund support in the past years. Some of the main drivers of this support have been really, number one, the fees just haven't been updated consistently. And so that is part of the equation. Costs go up each year, but we in the department, the fees just haven't been addressed consistently enough to keep up with those increases. And so the next part of it is just intentional subsidy by council of some of the program costs. There is a portion that is for the fee-related work that the general fund helps subsidize, and that's what we would like to call the public share for those fee-supported activities. There's also an allocation of general fund dollars for the non-fee supported activities or tasks that we still perform but don't charge a fee for. Some of those things are, for example, customer service to applicants. We have what I think is one full FTE for what we call planner of the day, and that is a position where the staff members rotate and just help applicants with questions and any assistance they may need. And there are a couple of other non-fee supported activities. One of them is the Clark Conservation District that the county helps fund a little bit each year in the Wetland and Habitat Program. Next slide, please.
And I would say that's not just applicants, it's customer service. So customers that email or call the land use program with questions, they don't have to be applicants, which is why it's not fee-based.
Some more background on these programs is that there really hasn't been a major overhaul of the program's fees since 2008 or 9. So it's been many, many years. There have been a few smaller efforts in between, but from what I can see, there have been decreases and increases and decreases to some of the fees. And so really those efforts haven't had a whole lot of effect. And so, fast forward about 15 years, we're finally coming back to the major overhaul of these fees. And what we'd like to present to you is, as requested in the first work session, what the fees are currently, what they would be if we were to recover 100% of the costs of current costs to provide those services, and then what the fees would be at 85% cost recovery with 15% general fund subsidy of those fee supported activities. If we could go to the next slide, thank you. This slide here is, it's also from our first work session, but I think it's important to just show the amount of general fund support that these programs have received over the past 5 years. And as you can see, it's generally trending upward and going through 2023. And if we could go next slide. This slide here actually shows a forecast of what we think we'll need for 2024. And as you can see at the very bottom, I put the projected increase or decrease, and we're looking at a budget request for the fall supplemental that's going to be a little bit above what we asked for in 2023. Next slide. And as far as feedback received, we had a council work session last month, and some of the comments we received were about simplifying the tables, that we have for you, which we did, and we have those for you today. Make them easier to read, to understand, to add, a comparison column, as I mentioned previously, that shows the current fee, what we'd propose it as, if we're recovering all the costs, or the 85% scenario. And then we also have added some sample scenarios that show those categories, or those varying levels of general fund support in typical scenarios that we might find in the department. And so with the meeting on October 3rd with the Development Engineering Advisory Board, we didn't receive a whole lot of feedback, if I remember, on the fees themselves, like the increases really is what everyone looks at. But we did receive more feedback related to the points up there on the screen. And, that last one about possibly investigating expedited reviews for a higher fee, a premium of sorts, I think April has looked into. But not much in terms of comments on the fees themselves. So, and that's pretty much all I have as far as just a general background on things. And where we're at now is we have a second file, as I mentioned, that will hopefully be easy enough to read on the screen, but maybe if it isn't, then on your own personal computer screen. But it's the tables that show both programs' fees, and hopefully gives you a better idea on what the increases might look like at different levels of general fund support. And so starting here are some example scenarios. If you look at the green highlighted areas, those are really what describe the scenario, and then pardon me, the different fees, as they would be proposed, and what they are currently. So I don't know if we just wanted to go through those quickly, or if we just wanted to leave it up.
Why don't we go ahead and just see if there are questions? And then
I
if you-
just have one quick question.
Go ahead,
when you-
Karen Bowerman.
When you have an expedited fee, is that something close to, say, full cost recovery, 100%, or what is that?
We don't currently have an expedited fee. And what Deeb was suggesting is creating one and have it would be more than cost recovery to be expedited.
That must be considerably expedited, or it wouldn't take another 15% plus. What would be an example of the timing on expedited?
Counselor, this is Brent Davis, the Land Use Review Manager. Currently in the land use fee table, we do have something similar. There is an option that if an applicant is willing to pay for overtime and the staff are assigned to the project are willing to work that overtime, they can pay an increased fee in order to get that overtime service. It's not used very often because getting all the staff involved to agree voluntarily to do overtime is often challenging, and it is a 50% premium. So that's, I'm not suggesting 50% would be the number in a scenario where we propose some sort of expedited service. But that's just the example we currently have in our table. But it would basically be an applicant agreeing to pay a higher fee to get in return, get a guarantee they're going to get a faster decision. Now, we don't control all the factors that go into how long it takes to get through the process. A lot of it depends on the applicant and their responsiveness to, address things that need to be corrected in the application. But we can control, how quickly we turn those things around once we have them.
That would be hard to put on a table for sure, because who knows how much overtime would be needed. So I see the challenge there.
Other questions?
Yeah,
Council
Chair.
Marshall.
Okay, I'll go ahead. What would you suggest would be a reasonable frequency for updating to be more, more consistent with the fees going forward?
I can answer that. The good thing about the methodology that we used for this fee update here is that it's very easy to plug in new numbers, each year, and come up with the calculations instantly, because, most of the fees are based on staff time. And so once we know, the new rates that staff are being paid, we have percentages that we use for other things like benefits and indirect costs in the department and the program. And so it's very easy. It's all in a spreadsheet, and we simply just have to plug things into the spreadsheet and we can come up with updated fees.
So potentially it could be done annually?
We would very much like to do this annually, just like public health. I know they're very good about it. So
They're a good example for that. And you mentioned that there was a request for the fall supplemental budget. And I know we had a presentation this morning, so I'm wondering is that recommended, or what's the status with that?
It is absolutely being recommended. It's about 1.3 million, and it's every year that we've had to do this during the fall supplemental.
Great, thank you. And if it were at the 100%, that would still leave the planner for a day and answering questions would not be part of that. So that we're providing that service no matter what the fees are.
Correct.
Great,
Correct. There would be a small supplemental needed, but very small compared.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Counselor Young, I think you had a question or comment.
Yeah, thank you. Do have a question, and that is, have we looked into, are there any aspects of this? Because I know we don't have in-house engineers that actually engineer plans for people. We allow people to go to a third party, have that engineering service done, and then they stamp it, and we accept that at the county level. Have we looked into any of these different aspects of potentially, not doing it in-house, but allowing it to be done through a third party?
We have so we have engineers on staff that review outside engineer work against code. So whether that engineer's work is code compliant for Clark County. We have had external contracts for that engineering work. We have found that it is more efficient with our current engineers for many reasons, most of which has to do with access to our permitting system and being able to see the project as a whole. A lot of times when our engineers review, our inside engineers have the holistic view of the project, whether it's a subdivision or a commercial site, where the outside engineers don't have that much as much access to our planners, and then our permitting system, they have to have limited access to our permitting system. So we
Okay.
have found that our inside engineers are more efficient
Okay.
and cost
All right.
effective.
Thank you. And then, just a couple comments. So as far as 85%, 100%, quite frankly, I think it should be 100%. And thank you for developing these example scenarios, because that really helps me absorb this information a lot better. When you're talking about 120 unit development and, the change is $5,000, you divide 5,000 by 120, that's not terrible. I don't want to add any cost to affordability, creating a more affordability problem. But I do think cost recovery is important. The expedited process, I'm totally okay with the process that we currently have. I realize it may not work out very often, but I compare this to kind of like a toll road. If you build a new lane and you toll people to use that lane, then there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. People can pay a little extra and can use that lane. But if you convert an existing lane to a toll road, that is really inequitable, because now people that can't afford the toll actually go slower than they did before, because one of those lanes was removed for people that can pay. And that's kind of where I look at, when the suggestion that came forward is, I don't support having somebody pay a higher fee if that takes resources away from the people that are standing in the normal line, if that makes sense. So if it's diverting staff time, which is creating to a situation where people that aren't able or willing to pay that extra amount, project moves slower, I wouldn't be supportive of that.
Other questions? Michelle, did you have any? All right, then I'll dig right in, and I'll start with double tapping on what Glenn just said on a couple of areas. I am absolutely against expedited fee schedule, bumping someone ahead of the line. I mean, and I've seen this in other countries. I've seen this in other federal departments. They're performing a duty as an employee, whether county, local government, to perform a function. And then to have someone come in and pay more to have an expedited function for what they already should have access to, and to have someone with more money bump someone else on the line, I think is a totally unfair process. And I'll go a step further, because when I mention other countries, it's a form of soft graft to me. And I always viewed it that way. Hey, if you want your license stamped, you pay a little bit more if you want it done today versus next month. I saw that no matter where I worked in other countries. And I don't want our country devolving into systems like that. So I am absolutely against expedited fees. I am totally for cost recovery in those areas. And Glenn, you made the comment today, about that structural budget deficit. Law and Justice is a prime example. We don't get a whole lot of full cost recovery there from our criminals that enter the system, and from public defense to prosecutors to court time. There is almost nil cost recovery because you can't get it. But in those departments like public health, we should be getting full recovery, unless it's an area that we really need to subsidize. Like, I'm pretty sure we're still subsidizing some of the programs in our schools under the health department, but it helps us balance our budget for those services that the public wants to use or needs to use, that they pay full cost recovery. So I'm all in favor of that. The other issue generally, and we kind of talked about it during the last session, I mean, probably of all the random complaints out there in the system, our wetland and habitat review kind of is at the top of the list, where it seems like, is this art or is this science? And why do we have competing experts? Which gets us to the other generic topic of, why don't we accept an engineer stamp? If they're licensed in Washington State as an engineer, we should be accepting their stamp. and moving forward. And so we need an efficient process that's consistently fair to every applicant. I mean, that would be my goal with the money that you get to run your department, and whatever steps we need to do to reform the process, to have consistency, peer review within the office. And then the only other comment I'd make where you said, well, it's more efficient to do this in-house. I'm sorry. The government's here to help. There's pretty rare circumstances where the government can do it better than the private sector. This may be one of them. I don't know. You know, law enforcement, certainly we need to do that in Harris. Our sheriff needs to cover that, and we need to pay for that. We can't have the private sector weighing in that regard. But anyway, so those are my comments. I do support full recovery. I don't support in the least an expedited process. Every process should be as efficiently done as possible. The only question I have is, because we had this come up over the years, whether this is, you know, is this review happening? Are these inspections happening at the tail end, up front? We were promised more of a concurrent review process so that you don't get through all your hoops and then have habitat review or environmental review come in and tank everything at the tail end of a very lengthy process. So what is the status of when we're doing these inspections and reviews in the permitting process?
Is this on? Okay. So for land use, it is part of the preliminary approval process, the entitlement process. And any landowner for any purpose always has the option to come in advance of anything they're proposing to do and get the site assessment work addressed so that they know what they're dealing with when they prepare their application. It's called a predetermination. It's not required, but it is an option that anyone can take advantage of. And the cost is the same whether they do it in advance or concurrently with their application. Now, with residential building permits in the rural area, primarily, landowners are doing a lot of that work on their own or with, builders that aren't familiar with the environmental regulations. And so they often aren't even aware that there's a concern until they submit their application. If there are indicators mapped in GIS for wetlands or habitat, that automatically triggers a review at the initial review of their building permit application. Now, if there are concerns, that can slow down their building permit review process because it takes time to get out and do the site work. And then applicants often have to make adjustments to their application, which can take time on their end. We want to be engaged as early as possible in the process. There are cases, because not everything is mapped in GIS, these things are not easy to predict remotely, where we do find indicators that aren't mapped when we're doing, say, a stormwater review in conjunction with a building permit review. So that could occur later in the process because we may have already looked at the building plans once, and now we're getting a stormwater review that was also triggered concurrently with the building permit. Because we review every single engineering application, and whereas with the building permits, if those indicators aren't present, we don't even see them.
Super. Oh, you had additional comments?
I do. I have two more. We do encourage that you do the stormwater before the building permit because building permits are generally so quick now that you would want to do your engineering first so that they issue at the same time. And so that you would get to know that. And then with larger subdivisions and or commercial site plans, you have a pre-application, which they're going to tell you whether you have environmental concerns in your pre-application. And just in case they didn't catch it there's a 30-day early issues that they're going to tell you if they see them. And those are like these are project killers that they're going to tell you in your 30 days or really big hurdles you're going to have to get over.
Okay, super. Thank you. Is there anything you needed from us out of this work session?
Just a recommendation of how to go forward.
Okay. And and I agree with Councilor Marshall and across the board. I mean, this needs to be more regularly done as a goal to keep up so we don't have big jumps at any point. Does anyone else have any questions?
I just have a quick
Yeah, go
clarifying
ahead.
question related to, so the applicant can hire a wetland specialist, a consultant, and submit that as part of their application, and that our engineers review that, see it in a larger context, kind of a check and balance. That's how it operates right now?
For single family and, landowners that are just doing projects on their property that aren't doing development, unless they're triggering a SEPA review, they have the option to have our staff do all of the hard work for them. They have to accept our conditions and our mitigation plan when they do that. However, they always have the option to hire their own professionals, and even midstream, and they can bring their own professional in, and we will reevaluate what we're looking at based on the work that their professionals provide. For development, for anything that triggers SEPA, they are required to have their own professionals because it's reviewed by state and federal agencies. They have the burden of proof. It's generally, being reviewed by the public as well. So that's how we do that.
I think it's important to, that we do have some oversight in that process as we go forward. So I support that. And I'd be supportive of 100% cost recovery and coming back on a more regular basis.
So does anyone disagree with that? I pretty much said the same thing. I kind of heard that from Glenn. Another thumbs up. Michelle, all right. Universal. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have the treasurer
Thank you.
next in line?
Yes, well, it will be under policy updates, and we really don't have a lot before policy updates, so it's up to council. if you
Okay, so
wanna-
we're not going to have it as a work session.
No, it'll be policy updates today.
So thanks for coming, but it'll be a few more minutes.
Yeah, this is council time, so it'll be a separate. We got to start the recording for the second one.